You know, a lot of times when people talk about the pre-tribulation rapture and that there is no rapture, and they always say that it's just Christians who want to escape tribulation and they don't want to go through anything. Well, it's not like we're not already going through tribulations in our lives. You know, everybody has times of testing, times of mourning, and things are not always on the up and up peachy keen. When they tell you that Christians just want to escape and not go through a tribulation period and the judgment of God and all of that, they completely leave out the first part of the rapture, which is the resurrection of the dead, when the dead come out of their graves and their body is a seed that is like planted in the earth. When they die, the seed must die, and then it sprouts to new life, and the body becomes from mortal to immortal, from perishable to imperishable. So the rapture is not just simply people wanting to escape from the time of trouble coming. It's a matter of that the believers who have died in the Lord will come up out of their graves first, which means the ground has to split open and their soul comes down with the Lord, their spirit comes down with the Lord when he descends from heaven with a shout, with the trumpet call of God and the voice of the archangel, and the dead and Messiah rise first. So that means all these graves are going to be split open, and the reconstituted body is going to be turned from an unglorified body into a glorified body. And that happens before the living believers that believe in the King Messiah and have given their lives to him are caught up together with those who were resurrected first to meet the Lord in the glory cloud in the air. Now, my thoughts about why the Lord would take the dead believers first and raise them up out of their graves and take them up in the glory cloud first before the living believers that are still alive on the earth is because during the time of the tribulation and God's wrath poured out, the whole earth is going to be shaken. The ground and the land mass is going to move. It says every island shall flee away. So if the whole earth is shaken and every island shall flee away, and there are stars falling from heaven and everything will be burned up, and the wrath and judgment of God comes, it seems to me that God would get the bodies out of the ground before the land is altered during the time of God's wrath being poured out on the earth. There's going to be earthquakes, pestilences, and it's going to be severe, much worse than anything you've ever seen. I think about the tsunami that was in Japan a few years ago, and how terrifying that was when the ocean water just had no boundary and it just kept coming in inland and washing everything away. You know, when the Lord said that it would be like the days of Noah, there's several meanings to that, but one of the things that he said was that people would be marrying and being given in marriage. And if you go back to Noah's flood, it actually says that people were marrying and being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And then Jesus is talking to the Sadducees who did not believe in a resurrection. So they asked him about a man whose wife died, and then he married the next one, and then the next one up to 7. And this is very interesting because the time of Jacob's trouble is 7 years. And they ask him at the resurrection, Whose wife will she be, since all 7 were wives? And Jesus told them that they greatly erred, because he said, when they rise at the resurrection, that there is no more marrying or being given in marriage. And that's because the resurrection takes them out of their graves into a glorified body, just like people were marrying and being given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came and took all the rest of the people away. So shall it be at the coming of the Son of Man. So when you have the situation where one is taken and another left, one is grinding at the mill, it's talking about that there's a point when God will send forth his angels to gather out of the earth all things that offend. And that's when it's talking about that those people, where are they taken? And it says where the body is, there the eagles will be gathered. And that's talking about when he comes down to fight the battle of Armageddon, and these people are going to perish. He's going to gather out every evildoer and destroy them. He's coming down from heaven with those who have believed and put their trust in him already and accepted him as the King of Kings. You see a big difference when it says that the Lord will send forth his angels to gather out people that are offensive, that have not put their trust in him. You see a difference in that compared to the rapture, which is the Lord taking the believers first, which is the Lord descending from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel and the trumpet call of God, and he himself descends from heaven and calls us up into the glory cloud to meet him in the air according to the scriptures. This is different than the angels coming to gather out those things that offend and to do away with them, and their bodies are, left behind to be eaten by birds in the judgment. So one of the big points of this video is to say that when you hear somebody like John Rich just saying, that the pre-tribulation rapture was invented by John Nelson Darby, which it wasn't, because we know that the disciples, that it was written in the New Testament already when the disciples were alive, that the resurrection of the dead would happen first. That's going to alter the land, shake up the dirt, shake up the ground. Bodies will come up out of the ground, out of mausoleums. There'll be a great shaking and quaking when that happens. There's no doubt that it's going to shock the world when this event happens. And that happens just prior to those who are alive and remain being caught up with them. So those people that say there's no pre-tribulation rapture, it was invented, are completely wrong, because of the fact that the resurrection of the dead happens just instantaneously before the living go up to be with them. And Jesus gathers us together in the glory cloud. The Lord himself descends from heaven to gather us, whereas later on in the judgment, he sends forth angels to bring judgment and rip people away from each other, and those who have done evil will perish. So the marrying and given in marriage stopped. The day that Noah entered the ark, there was no more of that. And comparing that with Jesus saying that at the resurrection of the dead, they will neither marry nor be given in marriage, because they are like the angels in heaven when they have their glorified bodies. And when your body dies and your soul and spirit go up to be with the Lord is descending from heaven and bringing those souls and spirits with him And then their bodies are going to come up out of the earth or wherever their grave is. If they died in the ocean, you know, God will bring their bodies back together, but in a glorified state. At the Transfiguration, Moses and Elijah were on either side of Jesus, and he was transformed into his glorified state. And he was glistening and glistering from the glory that was inside this glory cloud that overshadowed all of them. And they saw him in this glorified state as he stood in the cloud, and the cloud stood over them. So this cloud is going to come and stand over us, and we're simply going to go into the cloud, just like they did on the Mount of Transfiguration with Jesus. I touched on that in a section of my book, The Almond Tree, Aaron's Rod, The Messiah, King of Israel, by Olive Press Publisher. It's got a lot of the glory cloud information in it, and if you want to read more, it's a huge volume, but it's worth every single glorious moment of reading revelations that the Lord gave me through the Holy Spirit. And when the Lord opens the door to do a film about it, I'm going to. One of the things I revealed in my book that just astonished me when the Holy Spirit showed me was that the Lord himself, God said himself, that the hiding of his face from Israel was like the days of Noah to him. So he's been hiding his face from them, and the New Testament tells us that they have been blinded in part until the times of the Gentiles are fulfilled. So this is why Jesus' miracle of healing the blind eyes had to do with Israel's ancient monarchy of Judah, and the last king of Judah's eyes were blinded, and there's been no king ever since. So here comes the true heir, King Jesus, and he's opening the eyes of the blind all over Israel, and they recognize, you know, that he is the son of David. Have mercy on me. And he comes over there and heals their blind eyes so that they can now see. So I began to realize that at the time when the Lord comes again, he unveils his face to his own people, Israel. They will see his face, and they will know who he is once and for all. So it'll be like the days of Noah when he comes again, and they will see his face, and at last it'll be like the days of Noah because of the unveiling of his face to Israel. And since the rapture event is a two-stage event with the resurrection of the dead first, it's not just an escape act on the part of Christians who just want to go up and don't want to face the Antichrist. In fact, we're not going to have the Antichrist as our king because we've already given our lives and hearts to the true heir of the tribe of Judah, of the descendancy and lineage of King David, which is Messiah Yeshua, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. So remember that it was already written in the New Testament that the dead will rise first, and those of us who are alive and remain that believe in the King Messiah, the true heir, shall be gathered up to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord. The people that don't believe in a rapture, they don't think the rapture's in the Bible, which it is in the word harpazo, which was, you know, a Greek translation of the original Latin, which was rapere, and it translates into English as rapture. It is in the Bible. It is right there at the snatching away, the taking of one's catching away believers as one's possession for oneself. And just prior to that is the resurrection of the dead, which will shake and rattle the ground of the earth to make these bodies come out of their graves. It's going to get people's attention, and I wouldn't be surprised if men's hearts are failing them from fear of the things that are going to be coming on the earth. Can you imagine having these bodies come up out of their graves and the graves split open and these bodies come up and then they rise to meet the Lord in the air? And then the living believers are raptured. So don't believe the lie that there's no rapture, because it's a dual event with the resurrection of the dead first. And it's not some make-believe wannabe wishing that the Christians don't have to go through the tribulation or meet the Antichrist, because we don't need to meet the fake king, the replacement king for King Jesus that the Sanhedrin will pick, which will get Israel into all kinds of trouble. And it'll be like when they wanted an earthly king with King Saul, and it caused them nothing but trouble. But at the end of the time of Jacob's trouble, the Lord's going to reveal his face, and that's going to be like it was in the days of Noah. You know, I just was thinking so much about how they never mention the resurrection part of it, and that it precedes the actual living believers being caught up, harpazo, raptured. So it's a dual event, and it's not the angels gathering out the things that offend to take them to be eaten by birds. It's a different event. Anyway, I just want to clarify these things, because if you leave out that huge part of the resurrection of the dead, and you say that we just want to escape, well, it does say to pray that you're worthy to escape all the things coming on the earth. So we are to want to escape. And it's not just wishful thinking on the part of the believers, but it's actually a blessing for those who've already died in Messiah, rising out of the graves before we go up, if we're living to meet the Lord in the air. And so we shall ever be with the Lord, which means we will be coming back down with him at the end of the 7 years, riding on white horses. God's army is following behind him, riding on a white horse of victory. And he will be fighting against those who are fighting against him and deny him as the true heir of David's throne. And it says that they will fight and war against the Lamb, because that's how they feel about him. One truly needs to think about the resurrection of the dead part of the event. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, which is at Rosh Hashanah, Feast of Trumpets, for the dead and Messiah shall rise first, and then we who are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them. That's harpazo, rapture, with them, snatched away by the Lord into the glory cloud. And remember that the glory cloud was in the wilderness, and the children of Israel went into the cloud, and they were covered by the cloud by day and by a pillar of fire by night. So their clothing never wore out, because they were protected in the cloud of the Lord. And this is what we're going to do. We're going to go in the cloud of the Lord and be protected. And we're going to go where he goes. You know, when the cloud lifted up, the people traveled. And wherever he takes us. And he said he's preparing a place for us, that where he is, there we may be also. And in his Father's house are many mansions. If it were not so, he would have told us. I go to prepare a place for you, and if I go to prepare a place for you, I will return and receive you unto myself, that where I am, there you may be also. So I'm just paraphrasing, but it's very, very clear. And we had rapture events in the past with Enoch, that he walked with God, and then he was no more because God took him. We had Elijah taken up by the fiery chariots of Israel, in the heavenlies, and he dropped his mantle, and then Elisha got a double portion of the spirit that was upon Elijah. So these are types and shadows of a rapture event that God can take you. And then, of course, Philip was transported from one place to another. And also when Jesus was in the ship with the apostles, suddenly the ship was at the shore, and it reached its destination instantly. So he is able to do all of these miraculous deeds, and we should never limit the Lord in any way, shape, or form. And that means we should not limit him at saying that God prepared a body to come dwell in, to take the punishment, to pay the bride's price, to take us back into the Garden of Eden-like state as the second perfect Adam. The first Adam caused all to die, and the second Adam is a life-giving spirit. And so we will put on the spiritual. We have the earthly bodies first, and then we have the spiritual glorified bodies. The earthly one with the dust comes first, and then the special glorified bodies come second, through the act of the reversal of the curse of death by the King Messiah, Yeshua, Jesus Christ of Nazareth. He reversed the curse of death, and he was the first fruits of those who die in the Lord, and his resurrection was the first fruits, and then those that were resurrected at the time that he was resurrected were first fruits unto God. And then he has an order of resurrecting the believers and taking those who believe in him and have put their trust in him to be with him. So there's no need for us to be in the wrath or the time of Jacob's trouble, which is for Israel, because they are fulfilling the prophecy of Daniel in the last 7 years. So I hope this helps explain things a lot. Thank you for your loving support of my channel, financially, and also just giving a like and helping me to get this message out to the world. So I hope you give your life to the Messiah, the true heir, the true King, and give your heart to him and walk with him on a daily basis, and pray to the Lord that you're saved. And pray you may escape all these horrible things that are coming upon the earth, because it's going to be worse than any time ever. And he has not destined us for wrath, but he bore the wrath on the cross for us so that he could save us alive. And this is the plan of God. And there's no one who can just say John Nelson Darby invented the rapture and that Christians just want to escape, because it involves much more than that. It involves the dead coming out of their graves. So I hope that's a little clarification on that. It's a very important thing to tell you. So I know you know these things, but I'm just elaborating that that is part of what the pre-trib deniers deny, that they don't even mention the resurrection. These are just some astonishing truths I wanted to share, and truly it gives me great joy to tell you this, and I hope it gives you hope, and that you don't listen to these people that only have half the story. So I'll see you next time. Shalom for now.